This episode is brought to you by The Naked Dog, where owners learn how to speak dog. Allegra at The Naked Dog offers a holistic training program in which owners learn how to become someone that their dog trusts. I personally have experienced Allegra's magic at The Naked Dog, and I learned how important it is to not only be Pajama's owner and caretaker, but to also be her protector. So now when Pajamas and I are walking down the street and say another dog comes up, I take that protector role. I step in between Pajamas and that other dog. I tell the other dog no, and it has radically changed our relationship and the amount of trust that she has for me, and that is just invaluable. Use code KATE on The Naked Dog for 10% off any of her virtual courses or coaching programs. Can't recommend The Naked Dog enough. Give it a try and let me know how it affects your relationship with your dog. Put your hand on your heart, look up at the sky, smile and say, hey, I'm alive. Thanks for being alive with me today. Hi, and welcome back. This is the third and final installment of the story in which I share how I went from the deepest, darkest, most depressed I've ever been in my adult life to where I am today, which is the happiest that I've ever been in my adult life. Where we left off on the last installment was I had had a shift in the tides and a series of breakthroughs that helped me see things differently enough that I could begin to take steps to claw my way out of the deep cellar hole that I was in spiritually, neurologically, and definitely emotionally and psychologically as well. So the first thing was, I'll just recap those really quick. What I started doing in January was, number one, I realized that I needed to start saying yes to things instead of saying no and I can't and oh my goodness, I couldn't possibly and oh, I can't afford. And I said no to everything. It was always a no. There was no solution to my problem. So I started saying yes to things instead. I said yes to my Vipassana meditation retreat that I decided to go to, despite being really reticent to do it and afraid to do it because of my mental state at that time. I said yes to hiring a coach and a therapist. I said yes to going to this epic speaker training out in New Jersey. I said yes to applying for my master's degree program finally after thinking about it for so many years. And generally, I looked for less for the reasons why I couldn't do something and more about how I could walk over those reasons why something was a bad idea and just say yes and get myself out in the world doing things instead of just nursing and licking my wounds in the hole that I had been in. I also started taking a supplement that has worked for me in the past to help right my brain chemistry to help get me out of depression. It's called Solar Brightside Joy Boost. I also started leaning more on friends. I came clean to family members about the dark, challenging state that I had been in. And I probably two other most important things that I did were, number one, I realized that I had been creating my own misery largely, or most of my misery was a result of the way that I was choosing to look at my life and the situations therein. And then I decided to apply a practice of self-directed neuroplasticity, or SDN. What I prefer to call it is barge to jet ski, which is a practice where anytime a negative thought would come into my mind and I noticed it, I would immediately shift it and delete it rather, and replace it with a positive, more adaptive, more constructive thought. So it was an ongoing process of sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day. I'm doing the reps of negative thought coming in, notice it, delete it, replace with something more realistic and more positive. So that brings us to where we are at the beginning of the year in 2023. I'm doing the work, trying to find my way out. By no means was it a plane taking off into the stratosphere. No, it was like anything. It was messy, there was ups and downs. I'll never forget this day that I was on a call with my coach. I don't remember when it was. It probably had to be like March or April, and I was just a blubbering mess, just crying to her on the Zoom. Of course, we're in the Zoom era. And so she could see all of the snot all over my face. And I was crying to her. I think about like, I didn't know where I wanted to live. And I didn't like my current living situation. Oh, what am I going to, I don't know where to go. And I don't know I'm going to afford it. Just, and this is like after I had started doing the work, right? Like, because it doesn't happen in this like clean, like fly off into the heavens. No, I was on a low point again. And it was so great because I'm just blubbering. And finally I like paused for reaction. She gave me the space to cry and let it out. And then finally, when I paused for reaction or took a break to like wipe my nose, she said, Kate, can I? She was from Eastern Europe, had this fabulous accent, just such a gorgeous woman. Can I, can I tell you something? I was like, yes, yes, please. And she's like, no, no, I really need to tell you something. I could tell that it was going to be like a thing. So I'm like preparing myself. Yes, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. Kid, I think you sound a little like a victim. This sounds like a victim. And as soon as she sprinkled that little victim word on my head, I knew she was right. I knew she was right. And I just was like, received it, and we talked about the victimhood. But really, she was right. It was like I was just in my problem. I was in my drama. There's no solutions. I'm stuck. Help me. This is horrible. My life is terrible. And that's what it was. And I was so grateful for her. And this is why we need outside counsel. This is why we need coaches and therapists and friends who just can let us cry on their shoulder, and also just when it's necessary, tell us like it is, because yes, I was being a victim and I needed to hear that at that moment. And so I dried my tears and opted again to say, all right, let's catch myself. And instead of swirling down the toilet even further, let's get out of this kiddie pool of shit and walk out and start looking for some freaking solutions instead of just seeing closed doors everywhere and acting like a helpless child. So that's what was happening. And let me just say that I believe that when we are on a correct path, I'm not saying the correct path, I'm saying a correct path. When we're on a path that is conducive to our spirit, that behooves our soul, we receive signs that we are on that correct path. Now, whether you believe those signs come from God or the angels or the universe, okay, or whether you believe that those signs come from our brains designed to look for patterns and validation and confirmation, and that when we're in maybe a more positive mindset, we're more apt to see some positive signs. I don't care. I believe in both of those, actually. I believe in both of those are true. And I started seeing very, I would say, kind of miraculous, magical, at minimum, magical signs once I started doing this work. So January was when, I really kind of had these realizations and started doing the work. And here we are now in, I believe, early May. And I had gotten the invitation to go to a Burners Without Borders summit at Fly Ranch on the Black Rock Desert, which is really special for me because that's an incredibly special land for me as a burner who, very dedicated burner who went to Burning Man for 7 years straight. Once you pop, you can't stop. Although now I'm on a break. I got the invitation to go to this. Essentially, I'll say it's like an environmental summit at Fly Ranch, which is the home of the Geyser, which is some private land owned by the Burning Man organization. And I have this friend, Natasha, and oh my God, like total, I got to have her on the show. She's amazing. You're going to love her. We tend to go through things sort of similarly, or like around the same time. She'll be just ahead of me, or I'll be just ahead of her. So we can kind of lead the way for one another. And at this time, she had also been really struggling for a while. And I knew that she needed that summit just as bad or more than I did. So I got her an invitation. It was an invite only thing. Got her an invitation. She said yes, which is huge because when we're in these challenging places, it's really hard to say yes when we're so used to saying no and being in the problem instead of the solution. So we went and it was amazing, incredibly special. We saw all these wonderful environmental speakers and met epic people who are doing really incredible things in the world. And on the way back, we are driving in her car down the highway. And the Black Rock Desert it's out in the middle of nowhere in northern Nevada. Sorry, I said it the wrong way. It's Nevada. Natasha, the Nevadan, will tell you that it's not Nevada, it's Nevada. We're driving and Pyramid Lake is on our right, I believe. Yeah, Pyramid Lake is on our right and we're on native land. It's very spiritual land. I always feel it when I go out there. And Pyramid Lake in particular has a lot of magic and mythology and spirituality associated with it. So we're driving, and all of a sudden, as we're chatting excitedly about this beautiful weekend that we had and what's to come in our lives, we're driving on a highway going 65, 70 miles an hour. Something comes and lands directly on the highway. And I look closer. It's a freaking hawk. Flew and out of nowhere, lands in the middle of the highway as we're hurtling towards it at 70 miles an hour. And I look at Natasha, she's like, that's a hawk. We're like, that's a hawk. We're hurtling towards it. I'm sure she let her foot off the accelerator. This hawk turns and looks directly at us and just stays there for I don't know how many seconds. And we're hurtling towards it. And then at the last moment, like maybe one or two car lengths, I'd say, when we're 2 car lengths away from it, this hawk staring eye to eye, it flies up, flies on my side next to the lake, flies behind our car, and then flies next to us as we are traveling down the highway, flies directly to our side, flying for, I don't know, time. What is time? 20, 30, 45 seconds. And it flew next to us and we're just like, I couldn't believe it. And then finally the mountains, there's mountains on our left side. The mountains kind of get in the way and it has to fly out. And that was my first really serious hawk encounter ever. But Natasha's a medicine woman, I believe. And she has had apparently many hawk encounters. She told me at that moment, she said, Hawk is my sign. I know this. I've had hawk encounters. Hawk means pay attention. I need to pay attention to something in my life. That's what she said. And I was just obviously blown away and thinking, oh, maybe I need to pay attention to something in my life too. So we're just like so profoundly affected by this just beautiful encounter with this bird. But hawks they have incredible vision. They have these talons. They see their prey. They go for it. So hawk typically means, among other things in, like spiritual and shamanic traditions, pay attention. Okay. So I still continue to work on my stuff, trying to get my mind right, my spirit right. The next month, I am giving one of my walking meditations at Umlauf Sculpture Garden in Austin. And if you don't know, I give incredible walking meditations that I learned at Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in France. I came back and that's when I became a walking meditation guide of my own accord. And I've now given this walking meditation experience at Umlauf Sculpture Garden over 300 times. Okay. So that means that I have been to Umlauf Sculpture Garden in Austin. Imagine going to the same museum 300 times. And guess what? I love going every single time and it's different and wonderful every single time. But on this particular day in June, I'm with my clients and there's one part of my experience my walk where I allow them to break away from me and to follow their own bliss, just so they can experience what it's like to be on a meditation walk, not following the leader and just sort of, following their own accord, doing what they feel called to do. And I always tell them, this is your time to just follow your bliss, and we will meet up. You're welcome to begin making your way over there when you see me on that footbridge. So this is what I do. And then on that footbridge, I lead them through a very, very profound awareness experience. On this particular day, my clients are doing their thing. They're walking around. I'm making my way eventually toward the footbridge. And as I make my way toward the footbridge, I see directly at my eye level on the railing of the footbridge, 3 feet, I'd say, in front of me, a hawk staring directly at me. You guys, a hawk staring directly at me. I'm like looking around. This hawk is just staring at me. As soon as I walk up, it didn't fly away. It's just we're eye to eye. So I kind of like take a trepidatious step or two forward. The hawk doesn't move. It's just like staring me down. So I just stand there and take the moment in. It was incredible. And then somebody else came up, I think, behind the hawk, and he or she majestically flew away. So now I'm like, wow, 2 hawk encounters in the span of a month. This is starting to be a thing, right? The next month, July, I am on a camping trip with my family. And you may or may not know that I quit drinking. I got sober from alcohol. I decided I'm never drinking again in 2020. On January 18th, 2020, I had this really spiritual experience where I was just sitting, feeling super fucking hungover. And I finally had this realization. I'll do a whole other episode on this, that I needed to, in order to reach, this is the message that I got downloaded, was I heard a voice say, to get to your next level of spiritual growth, you need to stop drinking forever. Or you need to stop drinking, I think it said. That was my clear message. So the reason that I bring that up is because here we are now in July, and my mom has struggled with alcohol addiction her whole life, or her whole adult life, right? Like, it's no secret. I'm sure I have the gene. I'm sure she has the gene. Like, it gets passed down. And we are on a family camping trip for my sister's birthday in Oklahoma. And I had this sense, I was going to bring my RV on this camping trip, but I kept having this inner sense of like, no, don't bring the RV. Don't bring the RV. And finally, at like a few days before the camping trip, I told my sister, I was like, can you just cancel my campsite for my RV? I'm going to ride and stay in mom and dad's RV. They had rented one, and there was a bed for me. I don't know why I wanted to even take my RV in the first place. But as soon as I made that decision, I was like, oh, I'm going to stay in their RV. I'm not taking mine. I just felt like, okay, I felt good. Everything is right. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but essentially my mom had a very serious seizure in the middle of the night, at least partially related to, alcohol consumption, and also just, the state of health that long-term alcohol use puts our bodies in. And the very next day, when she had gotten admitted to the hospital because they said that she was going to die, or that she would die if she didn't get admitted to the hospital, the next day was her last day of drinking. This was July 2020, July 22nd, actually, 2023. Whew. So we got back to Austin after she has this profound, serious, terrifying experience, and decides that she's going to get sober, not for us, but for her. And we get back that day and we're unloading the car. And then I go out the front door to get something, and directly on the center of the front lawn, like not on the side, not on the sidewalk, not blowing in from the road, one hawk feather laid on the dead center of the front lawn. So here we are. Hawk number 3. I walk out to that feather, clear hawk feather, the stripes, perfect condition, like gorgeous. I pick up that feather And I bring it inside and I give it to my mom and I say, Mom, this is yours. This hawk feather is for you. And I tell her about my other hawk encounters. And I say, this is the gift for you. She takes it. She still has it. She's still sober to this day. She is actually celebrating. Ooh, I'm going to get emotional saying it. She's going to be celebrating her 1 year sober tomorrow. And I celebrated my 4 year sober in January of 2024. So yeah, she's 62 years old, y'all. People can change. People can change. Magic can happen at any moment. That's hawk encounter number 3. So I'm just like, whoa, tapped in, feeling it. And I had been involved that year in this art piece that I got really excited about and I got really into, and I actually got too into it. I really put in too much time relative to other projects that I was doing. But I went to Burning Man that year and it was very special because as I shared with you in the last episode, Tigray Mashal Lively. It was, the first burn since they had taken their lives. And it was very tumultuous for me because that art piece that I had gotten involved with really went off the rails for sure. And so I went to the temple. And the other reason that this was so important for me is because of that promise that I had made myself. Not only it was Tigray, it was also the fact that 1 year prior, I had sat in the temple, the one that got burned down, and then they built a new one the next year. I had sat in the temple and promised myself against all odds, because with me and making promises to myself, and against all odds because I was really just in a really, as you know, challenging place, promised myself that I would not end my life, that I would stay. Actually, I didn't say I wouldn't end my life. I said I would stay alive until Burning Man 2023. And I would come back to this place and I would celebrate if I honored that promise. But I knew that I would honor that promise. And there were so many times, y'all, there were so many times in the time that I made that promise in the fall of late summer 2022 until that next year that the reason that I'm alive today is because I made and honored that promise. So I went into the temple that day and I walked in and there was this incredible altar, this incredible tribute to Tigray. It was sort of like in this old suitcase or something. And it was filled with all these incredible mementos and it had their picture. And I just knelt down on the ground in front of that. And I had the most cathartic sob. This lasted probably very long, 10, 15, 20 minutes of me just sobs, just racking and leaving my body. Sobs for the many times that I almost wasn't here. Sobs for the deep, dark place that I was in. Sobs for Tigray. Sobs for everybody else who had taken their lives. Sobs for everybody else who had died in that temple. Sobs for the fact that I was so fucking grateful to be alive and to have this moment and to feel that dust and that dirt underneath my knees and to have my hand on Tigray's altar. And once I just remembered this. Once I dried my eyes after this 10, 15, 20 minute just cathartic release of crying and feeling and just letting it all go on the dust, I sat up and was drying my eyes. And a little bird, like the size of a finch, flies into the temple. We are in the middle of nowhere. There are no trees around. We're in the middle of the Black Rock Desert. It's hot. It's dusty. I'm looking up, and this bird flies into the temple and lands up on, there were these high windows near the top of the structure. and it's just sitting there on a 2x4. And I'm like, is this a real bird? I thought it was a prank, honestly. I thought it was like, because where's this bird going to come from? And so I'm looking around. Like, is anybody else noticing? Nobody else was noticing this bird. It was like I was the only, was looking around and the bird stayed. And it was just sort of like looking here and there and like pecking around and looking out the window and then looking inside and kind of hopping here and there in that little area. And that bird was my hope. That bird was my sign. That bird was balm to my soul. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I noticed that someone was crying and was putting some items up on the wall for someone that they had lost. And I went up to them and I gave them a hug. And I said, I just want to show you something. Do you see that bird? And they looked up and their face showed me that that was a real bird and that they had not seen it. And they just, whoo, oh my gosh, crying. They started the tears and then they hugged me and they said that that bird was meaningful for them, for the person that they had lost. That birds were an important symbol for them too. And then I left the temple and I just another really beautiful, important moment. And which brings us towards the end. I have a couple more things to share with you on this journey to get to the end of 2023 and closer to where we are today in mid 2024. So now we fast forward to the end of the year in 2023. It's just a few months since that bird at Burning Man. And I was back in Marfa, where I started this journey back in 2022 before I went into the deep depression. I'm back in Marfa. It's cold out. It's winter, December in Marfa. It gets really cold here because it is at high elevation. And I am just feeling great. My life has hope. I am, largely most of my circumstances didn't actually change, but my perspective shifted wildly, right? It wasn't like, oh, things started going my way and I started making all this money and, somebody gave me this great opportunity. Not really. Mostly like there was some incremental growth and things were starting to go in the right direction, like logistically in terms of money and career and other things. But mostly 98% was that my perspective and my mindset had changed dramatically. So I was going to a meditation retreat with this meditation group that I've been a part of for many years in Marfa. And it was like a 2.5 day retreat. And, in the days, like a cold snap had come. And the day before the meditation retreat, it started to get really cold. And I just felt like I was coming down with something, maybe like maybe a cold or the flu. I was just feeling a little nauseous and a headache. But I pressed on with the meditation retreat. And when I was at the meditation retreat, I was feeling pretty good, actually. So I wasn't feeling super sick. Now, the final day of the meditation retreat, it was a half day. And that night, it was supposed to get really, really cold. So we finished the meditation retreat at about 1, I think, or 2 p.m. And I go out to the RV to grab pajamas to take her for a walk because she's been cooped up all morning. I open the door and she doesn't come to the door. And I thought that was a little bit weird. Here she is breathing with a really funny look on her face. There's pajamas. So I grabbed pajamas to, like I said, give her a walk. She didn't come to the door. I thought that was weird. So I grab her, put her on the leash and take her out for a walk. And the whole walk we were on, she was just acting very, very distant and she wasn't walking very fast. And she was just like she just seemed very out of it. So I'm like, gosh, what's up with this dog? Is she just like really tired or is it super cold? I don't know. So I drive to actually the place where I am right now, where I'm recording this episode. I drove here to my favorite spot And I parked and I had a bunch of stuff to do on my computer. So I'm sitting here at my table working on my computer. It's cold outside, but it's sunny. And I am just starting to feel crappy again. And that night, it was supposed to be an insane cold snap. The night before had been really cold, like 17, but tonight was supposed to be even colder, like down to 11 degrees. And I was, getting ready to the day's pressing on. I'm feeling kind of crappy, but I'm just like, just press through, like, whatever. Like, I'm just kind of like ready to go to bed. I was feeling tired. I was feeling nauseous. And I look up from my computer and I'm like, come on, get your shit together, Kate. Like, you're fine. And I looked out this window right here. And as you can see, sort of, it's a field behind me. I'm going to like move out of the way. It's a field. It's very blown out because of the light, but there's a beautiful field in front of me. And I've been at this spot, I don't know, 20, 50 times. And I look up from my computer and I see something darting in this window over the field. It's a hawk, you guys. It is a freaking hawk. Not only is it swooping and diving, but it's going making whatever fucking sound hawks make. And at first I was like, "Oh my god, a hawk, amazing." I was so stoked to see it. I'm looking at it. And then like time is going on and this hawk is just and this is a rectangular window and I swear this hawk was like it was like this was a TV screen and it was just staying within the bounds of this screen. And finally, I'm like, "Oh my god." I get up from my table here and I sit right here looking out the window at this hawk going, "What is going on?" I even got my phone. I can't remember if I videoed or not. And it was just very clear that this hawk was like, "Here for me?" That's honestly what it felt like. And so I finally, after, I don't know, it seemed like 2, 3, 4 minutes, finally the hawk flies away. And I sit back right here on this couch and I was like, wow. Wow, this is unreal. What an amazing experience. And then I was like, hawk, hawk. What does hawk mean again? Hawk means hawk means pay attention. I've been feeling like shit. Pajamas was really out of it. I wonder if I have a propane leak. So I rush over to the cabinet. I grab my propane detector out, and it's this device where you have to like hold it outside to calibrate it on fresh air. And then you have to like play with this dial until it gets to a certain thing. And then you bring it inside. And as soon as it senses it will, if it senses, it makes a noise like, "Rrrr." And I swear as soon as I brought it inside my RV, it was the loudest, highest rating that it can get. And it really does sound like that. I know I made it sound like Kermit the Frog, but it really does make it sound like that. It goes click, 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 click. So I am like, oh my God, I have a propane leak. So I'm like testing all the area by the fridge, by the furnace heater, by the stove. I have multiple leaks in this thing. So I think what happened was the night before it had gotten really cold. And when it's cold, metal contracts. And I think it must have loosened a bunch of connectors. But as soon as I saw that, I start testing it. Another test you can do, just so you know, in addition to having a propane detector, if you don't have that, you can also fill a spray bottle with soapy water and spray it on the propane connector points. And if there is a leak, it will bubbly water will start to spurt up, or bubbles will start to spurt up. So I found multiple leaks, big leaks. I'm starting to tighten them, to fix them, to keep the windows open, to air this out, to protect Pajamas and I. And I just thought about how that night it was supposed to be super, super cold. And so I would have closed up all my windows, put the heater on, the propane heater. I would have had the fridge going on propane as it does, and I would have gone to sleep. And I might not have woken up, y'all. Whew. And the reason that is so relevant to the story of this 3-part series that I'm sharing with you is partially because it's the 4th hawk encounter in 6 months. It is also a hawk encounter that saved my life. because it caused me to pay attention. And if you remember, when I was in the lowest of the low of my depression, the way that I had planned on unaliving myself was to take my RV, hook up a hose from the exhaust into the window, take some sleeping pills, go to sleep, and not wake up. And now here we are, 1 year later, after I couldn't get that idea out of my head for months. And I am so grateful that that hawk saved my life. I am so grateful to not be dead. I am so grateful to be alive. What a change. In 1 year, I almost ended my life myself in that way. And then in 1 year, I don't want anything to do with dying and ending my life. And I'm so grateful to that hawk. And it makes me think about a story that my friend Rose, who's my friend here in Marfa, told me once. She said that there was a period in her life when she was really grappling with this question of like, why am I here? What's the point of all this? Am I even meant to be here? Like she couldn't find her path. She felt so lost. And so it all culminated in this one day when she was sitting out on her back table here in Marfa, in her backyard. And she was just like head in hands, just like asking God and the universe and anybody who would listen, like, why am I even supposed to be here? And she sat there from the time of the day into the evening. And then as the stars appeared out here in West Texas, these beautiful bright stars came out. She had this realization as she looked up at that night sky. And she realized that the evidence that she's meant to be here is that she's here. And yeah, you can challenge that. There's tons of reasons why you could say, oh, it's not enough. That's not evidence. But isn't it? We were born. I'm alive. I'm here. Isn't that enough? And is that where we can begin to move on with our life, where we just accept that we're here and that we're meant to be here? In that low, low point of my depression, I felt that God had forgotten me. Regular life didn't work out with the marriage and the job and the house and all of that. Alternative life at that point, I was like, this isn't working out for me either. There's no path for me. God has literally forgotten about me. I'm just here and I'm lost and there's nothing for me here. So I might as well just leave. Now I can tell you, I'm meant to be here and God forgets no one. Thank you for joining me on this 3-part story adventure. I'd love to hear if you have any questions or requests for elaborations on some of the side stories I alluded to. Please share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's in the low part, someone who maybe you suspect that they have negative thoughts on a loop that they've let go unchecked. Send them this podcast, send them this show, Be Alive with Kate Manser, and point them to this 3-part series so that they can see how even when you feel like there's not a light at the end of the tunnel, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Nothing lasts. Happiness doesn't last forever. Depression doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts. Even though it feels like there's no way out of that depression, it will not last forever. Please have hope. Please keep going until the light comes back. Look for light. Retrain your brain. Ask for help. Say yes. Take medicine if you need to. You're meant to be here. God forgets no one. It's a beautiful day to be alive, and I'm so fucking happy that you're alive. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I am honored to share this alive time with you. I'm a new show and I love your support. It helps me. It helps bring this show to others who might need this message. And, maybe it helps to buy some treats or food for pajamas along the way. So please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs a little aliveness or a little bit of Kate Manser in their life. You never know. Lots of love to y'all. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time.